welcome to anyone else that's joined in the past minute or so. So just super quick introductions. So my name's Sam Llewellyn. I'm a consultant at Vitaccess, and I'm working closely with Mark, who's on the camera as well, on this project. We both work for Vitaccess, with the company that runs the CMT&Me study, and develop the app that I know many of you joining today have already downloaded and are using. So welcome. Okay, and just to give some information about the webinar today, we're just going to do a presentation for about 20 minutes, and then we'll just open it up for 10 minutes of Q&A. So I think it should be fairly easy if you've joined to GoToWebinar to enter questions in the boxes on the right-hand side. So if there's any questions you have while we're going through the slides, or anything that you've sort of joined the webinar with a question in mind on, feel free to pop it in there, and we'll try and get to as many of those at the end of the webinar. Okay. So we'll just start with a quick bit of background on the study, and then I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's just going to go through some of the findings from the data that we've collected so far. So for those new to the CMT&Me study, or those who are already taking part, just a reminder on the purpose of the study. So it's based on various things. So one being that there's very little published research on the daily lives of CMT patients to date. The value, therefore, then of this study is to collect real-time data directly from CMT patients, which helps those working in the CMT field, CMT researchers and CMT patients themselves, to have more understanding and awareness of how CMT patients are currently managed, treatment patterns, the symptoms they're experiencing, and various other things. And what we're hoping, and what we feel like we're achieving with the CMT study to date, is that we're really identifying gaps in how CMT is managed, and by collecting this data and sharing it back with the medical and patient community, can hopefully contribute to positive change. And so just a quick overview of the study itself. Yeah, that's loaded up. So it's a study of Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, type 1A, and all other subtypes. It's an international digital lifestyle study. So the study first launched in the US and the UK, and has since then launched in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. It's open to adults only, and so far we've got over 2,300 registered participants, and I think it's just over this now, but about 550 of those are from the UK. So thank you very much to those of you that are already taking part in the UK. And the study itself is co-created with input from patients and patient advocacy groups and key clinical opinion leaders. So we've just got up on the slide there the patient advocacy groups that we're working in close collaboration with on this project. Data capture. What we have in the study app at the moment is a medical profile feature, which is a set of surveys that range from surveys asking questions about treatments. We have questions asking about CMT diagnosis. We have questions asking about lifestyle and work or study. And there's also then another section of the app, which is validated patient-reported outcome instruments to quantify the burden of disease and assess health-related quality of life. And I mentioned this on the previous slide, but the study launched first in October 2018 and will continue until at least December 2023. Moving on, just a quick slide on data privacy and security. Access to data is controlled by an independent scientific advisory board, which is made up of clinical leads and patient group representatives who input into the design of the study. This scientific advisory board meets at least once a year to discuss key findings, and Farnext, who sponsor the study, have access to aggregated anonymized data, although this is under the supervision of the advisory board. The study has been ethically approved by Salus IRB and a local ethics committee in Spain, and is conducted in accordance with best practice, which includes the EU GDPR regulations. Okay, and yeah, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's just going to go through some of the key findings, both global and specific to the UK. And these findings are based on a recent data cut that we took from data almost 2 years after we started the study. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks very much, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and many thanks for attending. So yeah, as Sam said, I'll take you through some of the key findings from the study so far. This study generates really a wealth of really granular data, so it's not possible to take you through all of those today, but these are just some highlights really that we thought could be of interest to you. So if you go to the next slide, Sam. Starting with epidemiology, we have found that there's more women than men in the study, as you see there. You know, across all the different countries, 71% women versus 29 men, and there's a similar pattern actually across the different countries within the study. Most places, and a couple of exceptions, Italy, Germany, where the proportion is slightly lower female than male, but still more than 50% actually. And we found that the average age of participants is 47 years old. And if you go to the next slide there, we've got lots of information about symptoms. So one of the areas we asked participants was around ranking within the app the symptoms of their CMT by importance. Now, of course, perhaps it won't surprise many people, those CMT patients particularly, the weakness in hands and feet was the one that came up the highest. 29% of responses were hands and feet. Then difficulties in walking, weakness in feet alone, and fatigue. And those are the most important ones. We also asked about the other conditions that CMT patients experience, so comorbidities. So we had, as you see in the lower part of this slide, depression was the highest one, 41%, through anxiety, GI problems, respiratory, and other medical conditions which we grouped together. So those are the symptoms, and some of the symptom information that we got back. And if you want to go to the same next slide, then Sam. We were very interested also in the conditions of symptoms first appearing, and then the delay from that to a confirmed diagnosis for CMT. And what we found actually was that on average, the first symptoms were noticed at the age of 17, but actually it was not till 10, on average, 10 years later till the first diagnosis was found. So a gap of 10 years between symptoms and diagnosis, which is obviously a very, very long time. And that's actually in line with what's been observed in the published scientific literature. So, you know, consistent with that very long delay between symptoms and getting a confirmed diagnosis. So if you want to, next slide then, please. From that general picture, we also looked at that in a little bit more. And for all of these things, actually, we've got picture in of how they vary by country and by subtype actually of CMT. But we haven't got time to present all of that, but just some of the detail around that. We've presented here of comparing the UK and how it stacks up with other countries in the study. So remember, US, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. So on this slide that you see in the graph, the time, those columns refer to the time in years. So there's the time from in orange, onset of care to care, onset to diagnosis, and care to diagnosis. So the UK, when you look at the box in red, you'll see that actually the UK fares relatively well compared with other countries. So for instance, the onset to diagnosis time in the UK, that's these, the purplish bars that you can see in the red box, around about 9 years, something like that, versus, for instance, Germany, a lot higher, over 15 years. So I guess one of the things, that's a significant interest, of course, to patients who are living those delays and their families. We haven't got too much time to go through all of the other subtypes. We did see that CMT2 diagnosis is often at an older age in the UK, which we could speculate that might be because it's less common, less well understood. People are less on the lookout for it, perhaps. Next slide, then, please. We also were very interested in how a diagnosis is usually performed, and as many people will be familiar with, there's different aspects of what can lead to that diagnosis. So you see those different aspects represented in the columns of this chart. So examination by the doctor, EMG test, genetics, family history, nerve biopsy, and another. And these are what was found was the clinician examination was the most frequent part of that, right through to nerve biopsy being actually pretty low, around 10%. And we found there was no major differences when we looked at the UK versus other countries. And again, that's borne out, this real life study is borne out in the theoretical approach that perhaps was understood before. Carry on then, please. We, as Sam mentioned at the beginning, this is one of the really exciting things about studies like this that we recruit in the community, is that we're able to have quite broad inclusion criteria for it. So although we're very interested in CMT1A because that's the most common subtype, actually we also recruit participants in the other subtypes that you see there. So one of the opportunities that therefore opens up to us is to explore whether the split of the subtypes that we have in our cohort of patients in our studies is similar to the known split of those subtypes, the epidemiology that's seen in the literature. And actually, when we look at this, it is very similar. So that gives us a lot of confidence in the approach that we're following, and that the cohort that we have is representative of the wider population of CMT. So as you see, CMT1A is the highest represented with 60% of the distribution, and you see also that there's 13% a minority of people who either don't know, can't remember, or it's other subtypes. Next slide then, please. There's a lot of, certainly the participants in the study will be familiar with this, but there's a lot of questions in the study using what are called patient-reported outcomes instruments. These are these standardized scientific questionnaires to understand some various of the aspects of burden of disease. And some of that's around quality of life. Now, there's different aspects of that. And this slide shows some of the results we've got about those different aspects. So pain, sleeping, fatigue, and disabilities. And what you see in these sliders is, the bigger the number, the more problematic those aspects of quality of life. So you see for pain, the mean is 61 with a high up to 78. And I guess just the high level reading of this is that big aspects of impact on quality of life are pain, sleeping, fatigue. Disabilities is actually, the mean is lower, but you see quite a high at 80. That's the highest response that we get. And there's also the final one, the quick dash, is also lower perhaps than you'd expect for the other ones. John, yeah, Karen, to the next slide, please. Other aspects, I mean, quality of life, as you can, is a construct that has lots and lots of different aspects. So we also asked things about cramps and falling. So when we asked about cramps, we found 82% of participants report cramps at least once per week. And actually, we saw as many as 15% reporting cramps on a daily basis, which, you know, many will be familiar with. That's pretty significant, and that's of course going to have quite an impact on quality of life. We also asked about falling. So there's a specific survey that is designed around falling, and we had a high level of concern about falling during social and physical activities inside and outside the home. Now, that's particularly interesting. Of course, that's particularly important for patients. And one of the things that we did, and you know, these types of digital studies are very one of the benefits of them is that actually it's possible to adjust them, look at what the data are like, and adapt the strategy that one has accordingly. So in seeing this and in discussing the scientific advisory board members, the clinicians, and the patient groups, when we saw this information about falling, we thought, well, actually, it would be valuable to understand a bit more about how frequently people actually were falling. So what we did was built into the study what we call a falls tracker, which gives people the ability to track falls, etc., as they happen. So again, that wasn't at the start of the study, but we built that in based on these falls data. Next slide, please, Sam. So we also asked questions about lifestyle. You know, as you see here, we've got questions about smoking, alcohol consumption, diet, and exercise. And what you see on the right here is comparison of the data we had for the UK versus all of the other countries. Overall. So overall, you can read through the differences yourself. But you know, a few more smokers in the UK than overall. Few less drinkers than overall. A bigger difference in terms of diet. You know, those people who eat fruit and vegetables daily, lower in the UK, and the same as when it comes to exercise. But I mean, broadly, I think these are pretty comparable scores for these different aspects of exercise. Next one then, please. Treatments, of course, there's lots of variation in treatment patterns for CMT. So we asked about the type of treatments patients were using. So that ranged from physical therapies and medicines, orthotics and surgical procedures, as you can see there. And within some of these, we got subdivisions. So what type of medicine? So as you see, biggest one was medicines for pain, perhaps not surprisingly, and then also, maybe not surprisingly as well, given that what we've seen previously for the high incidence of depression, medications for depression to go with that as well, and anxiety as well. As we saw previously, that's come up too. And when it came to orthotics and walking aids, insoles the biggest. It's closely followed by ankles and leg braces, and then walking sticks at 36%. Next slide, then, please. So we also, one of the really interesting things is about how patients are, the medical teams, the healthcare teams that patients are treated by. And this slide shows a really big variety of the number of people, number of types of healthcare professionals who contribute to that care. And it's a pretty complicated slide, so you might not be able to see all the detail in all of those countries. But basically, you know, there's about 10 different healthcare professionals that contribute to care, with slight differences in patterns across countries. And those different roles include physiotherapists, family doctors, podiatrists, pain, etc., etc. Now, when we looked at the data for the UK, we found that actually the GP, the family doctor, was the most important one as part of their care, which I guess is probably consistent with the importance of the GP as in medical provision, primary care provision in the UK, followed by neurologist and podiatrist. Next one, please. And that's a really quick summary. So many thanks. The final thing to say, I guess, before we'll go on to some questions, is again many thanks to all of those people who've contributed to to this study so far. I mean, this is a pretty innovative study. We were delighted to get it off the ground, and now to have close to 2,400 participants who are engaged with the study really has given us a fantastic opportunity to explore the impact of CMT on patients across these different countries. So thank you very much.
Okay,
Sam,
yeah,
back
thank you,
for
Mark.
Q&A.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna have a quick flick through the questions. So one that did come up at the beginning was, how people can join the study, how they can contribute to the study. So I guess, I'll just say that all data for the study is provided via the CMT&Me app. So this can be downloaded from your app stores. So if you're on an iOS device, go to the Apple store and type in CMT&Me, and similarly if you're on an Android device, do the same on the Google Play Store, and you should be able to download the app from there. Once you download the app, you create an account. As it is a study, there'll be a consent document as part of the registration to read through. Once you've consented to that, you're in the study, and then you should hopefully see sort of the things that we've described here: medical profile section with all of the questions asking about treatment patterns, your diagnosis, your work or study, and also all of the surveys then that Mark went through on cramps and fatigue, etc. And we've also been developing this app with the patients, the users in mind. So hopefully, to those that are already on the app, and for anyone new joining that might not have seen this already, we have a knowledge section of the app which contains previous study newsletters giving updates on the study and sort of the work that the patient advocate groups that we're working with are up to. Also within that section is data nuggets. So similarly to what Mark's just gone through there, what we've been developing throughout the study is a series of monthly data nuggets, which is just high-level findings on the data that you're all contributing to the study, presented in a nice, hopefully easy to understand way. So if you haven't seen those already, take a look through those at your leisure. So just
there's a question about sorry, Sam. There's a question about when we're going to publish the data. So, I mean, that's a great question, and actually, good news is we've started publishing the data already. So, as I was saying, that this type of study is very rich in the opportunities to publish data. So, we've started with already a number of conference posters that have been published, and we've presented at different academic scientific conferences. We've also started doing academic journal publications. So throughout the life of the study, that will continue. And typically what those publications do is either about the methodology for the study or about different aspects of the data we're exploring. So there might be something about treatments, there might be something about health resort, the type of healthcare professionals that treat CMT patients. There might be something about diagnosis, etc. So that's the idea, really. And actually, when we set up this study, one of the key things for the different stakeholders who are involved, so the patient groups and the clinicians who've supported it, they want to know that the data are going to be published. So, certainly Pharnex has been a really strong supporter of that, and there's been publications coming out of this study pretty regularly as we've progressed, and that's going to carry on.
Another question that came in, Mark, I don't know if you've seen that one, is what we're hoping to achieve with the study.
I mean, yeah, it's a great question. So the overarching objective for this study was to better understand how CMT and its treatments impact patients in their everyday lives. And that's quite a broad objective, but the background to that was that actually some of the aspects of the published scientific literature still leave some gaps, actually. It's not sufficiently granular about some of the things that we're talking about. And although there are some medical registries, which are really databases of patients, have been produced and exist already in CMT, those are typically not international ones like our study. And also they're typically based on data that clinicians report. Now that's just a different thing from the patient-reported data that we provide. So based on that background, we and Farnext and the patient groups and the clinicians at the start of the project thought there would be a really interesting opportunity to do a study like this that really focused on patient-reported data, gave patients the voice to, really share their experience of the disease and in its treatments on a daily basis. And of course, the fact that we're doing it digitally means we can get the data out very quickly. So if there are any changes in treatment patterns or other changes that happen, we don't have to wait years between the reporting of the data and us being able to publish them. So that's really the overarching objectives, understanding the burden of disease. And in doing so, we're also, as you've seen, exploring various facets of the disease, such as treatment patterns in more detail, health, how it's treated in terms of healthcare professionals, etc., as we go along as well.
Okay, and then another question that came through was asking about whether there's any plans to expand the app to include any other questions, e.g. around COVID.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So as I said in this a few minutes ago, these studies are adaptive and things change. Look, when we designed this study back in 2018, of course, no one had heard of COVID. So COVID questions are one aspect that we're considering. How we, along with other adaptations and additions of question based on what the data look like. How we work in that situation is that there's involvement of our scientific advisory board. So we would potentially take some suggestions to them about making changes to the app, and then that's something they would help us review from a clinical perspective, from a patient perspective. Remember, there's the patient advocacy, which is also represented on that group. Then, if there's a good rationale to make those changes, and then that's what we did, and that's what we did for the falls tracker that I mentioned in my call. Now, we haven't added questions about COVID yet, but that is something we have discussed, but hasn't been, no decisions been taken on that yet.
Okay, and then just last question, I guess, was someone just asking about how often they need to answer the questions in the survey. I guess this is someone that's recently downloaded the app and is just looking to know sort of how much time they need to give to the study.
So very quickly, I'm just conscious of time. So I think it's about 15-20 minutes a month. So that's the average requirement. Right at the beginning of the study, there's a few more questions to understand about your background, etc. So it'll take a little bit more time initially, but after that, it's about 20 minutes per month. But the other thing to say is that you don't need to worry about whether you've done anything or not. All of the things that we want you to do, so the surveys to reply to, etc. You get those notifications in your app that you will probably be familiar with other apps, and they're automatically programmed, so they'll ask you to do things at the right time. So you don't have to set separate calendar invites to do things on Thursdays or the 15th of the month or anything. It's all done automatically. All you need to do is hopefully when you see your notifications, click through and do what you've been asked to. But yeah, about 20 minutes a month, let's say.
Okay, and I just wanted to quickly end, just because I know that a few people have mentioned this, but in terms of updates to the study, hearing about when we're publishing results, reading the, I know you mentioned, Mark, that we recently published the study protocol in a scientific journal. For those type of updates, we do try our best to include as much within the CMT&Me app as we can within this knowledge section, but otherwise I think the best place to keep an eye out for this type of information is on our social media. So we're on Twitter, CMT&Me app, and Facebook as well. So we're constantly putting out, as I mentioned, these data nuggets. As soon as there's any publications, we're advertising those there and taking any suggestions and questions you have there. And you can contact us at any time at cmt@vitaccess.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So yeah, well, Mark, anything to?
No, we're just conscious of time. We'll have to cut it off there. But there's a few we haven't had a chance to go through all of the questions, so we will get back to, if we can, if we have your details, we'll certainly get back to those people who asked questions after the session by email. And as Sam said, if any other people have other questions they haven't had a chance to submit or think of afterwards, we'd love to hear from you. CMT@vitaccess.com. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.